Welcome back to another one of my quick technical overviews. So today I just want to do a short brief video on FortiEdge Cloud and how to deploy devices and stand up a network. So in FortiEdge Cloud you can have pretty much as many networks as you want, right? The guidance is to have no more than 2,000 devices per network. But realistically, you can have as many devices as you want, as long as you follow that rule. So you can see here that I've got site A and I've got site B that I've created. The combined default is the default one, as the name suggests, that comes when you stand up FortiEdge Cloud, or rather when you first log in. And you can see that in site A and in site B, I have one switch and one AP. So obviously the green means up and the red means down. If I go into each one of these, it will span up, as you see there, a new tab for each network I go into. And here I can go and have a look at my switch configuration, for example. I can look at my ports and I can see what ports are up and what speed they've negotiated at. There's nothing else connected there. So this port here is the port going to the network. Right, so let's say, for example, that you've spun up a site and that you've got a service provider NTE device or router, whatever that router may be. This port would go to that router and the switch would gain a IP address from the DHCP scope on that router, and then the switch would reach out to FortiEdge Cloud. Now, so long as you have registered your devices within your Fortinet support portal, then your switches, APs, and extenders — I don't have any extenders registered in my account, so I can't show you that, but the logic is exactly the same. You will see all the serial numbers of the devices that you've registered. They'll show up here automatically, right? So there's my switches and here's my AP. So these are the devices that have not been deployed. These are devices that I can deploy into a network. If I go to deployed devices, you can see here that in site A I have a single switch, AP, and in site B I've got a single AP, and exactly the same as far as the switches go, right? And in fact, this one, it's telling me there's a new version of code for that switch, which will be 766. This one is on 764, and I could upgrade that from here as well. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stand up another network, and let's just call it site C. That seems logical. Oops. Site C. You can put it whatever time code you're in. Okay, so I can keep it as GMT, or I can find London, which is GMT +1, which will be here somewhere. GMT +1, Central European, Europe, Dublin, that'll do. Submit that. Okay, so right now there's no switches and no APs in there. So what I do now is I simply go to my inventory and I want to deploy this AP. So action, deploy. And now it's going to ask me where I want to deploy that. I go site C. And obviously if I had more than one AP, I could just click the whole lot and do that. Go to my switches and I want to deploy that. Action, deploy. Site C. Okay, now if I come to my networks again, now I've got here site C, and it's saying that the switch is down at the moment. Now it's saying no APs there at the moment, and that's simply because that AP has not reached out. So by default, whenever you first start up a switch or an AP, what they do is they gain the IP address. They then reach out to the FortiEdge Cloud first. All right, they'll see whether or not they're registered, and they will see whether or not they have been deployed into a site. Now, this AP that I plugged in had previously been connected to a FortiGate, and this switch has not yet been powered up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause this video, and then I'm going to reset those devices, and then I'll come back once they're showing up. Okay, we're back, and as you can see, Site C is now up. We've got one active switch and one active access point. So now what we can do is, if we click on, sorry, let me just go back to that link again. If we click on there, it will take me into that network, okay, and I can see my status, and I can go into the configuration of those switches, or that switch rather, view the ports, and there's all my ports. So the configuration has been imported. So port 24 is my uplink to the upstream router, would be the site router, and port 1 is connected to the access point. So at this point here, I can also come along to my access points, and I can see that that's running, but you can see here I haven't actually set up any SSIDs, so we can go and do that. So I can create an SSID here, and let's call that site C Wi-Fi. Okay, and then I can go through my various options here. All right, we'll just give this a, so I've got all the various things, so enterprise, 802.1x, WPA personal, and so forth. So I'm just going to give this appreciate key of something for the purposes of the demo. Okay, you can use a captive portal as well, so you can use the built-in captive portal, or you can redirect it to one if you have one. And then you've got the choice of whether it's going to be NAT mode or bridge mode. So here I'm going to use bridge mode because in essence what's happened here is that the switch and the access point have gotten an IP address from the upstream router. If I put the access point into bridge mode, then all the clients will simply get that same IP address from the same subnet. But in this case, let's actually create, let's say, for example, we had another VLAN, whatever that VLAN might be. So we'll call it VLAN 10. Okay. Say never say that. And then we have Fortinet have access points with UTM capability. This one doesn't have them, but if it did, I could enable those features on here. And then any other capabilities that I so desire, and then once that's all created, I simply click apply. Okay, and then if I come back to my access point here in a few seconds, so there we go, not in a few seconds, it's there already. All right, so I can see my SSID is now enabled on that device. Now I created that VLAN 10 there, so what we would need to do, of course, is come along here and create VLANs. So let's go here and say add a VLAN. So let's call that VLAN 10, and I could site C Wi-Fi VLAN, for example, if I wanted to give it a name, and then obviously I've got whether or not I want to have DHCP snooping, which is more relevant to an uplink, private VLANs, and so forth. And you can see there it says request dispatched successfully. So that means that it's now scheduled that command to be pushed to the switch. All right, it's not going to happen instantaneously. It gets queued in terms of in a list with all the other configs that need to be sent down within your particular network. So if I've got a whole raft of switches here, then it'll take each job sequentially and push them out to the individual devices. So now I come along here. Let me go to interfaces rather and go view ports. And so that's my native VLAN on these ports. So there's port 1, but I want to turn that into a trunk. So what I'm going to do is configure that and say allowed VLANs, VLAN 10. Okay, now obviously this is just a demonstration. You would need to make sure that the link on the uplink to your router would supports that VLAN as well. So let's go back in here, okay, and let's go to port 24, configure, and let's give that an allowed VLAN 10 as well. Okay, so it's dispatched that, all right, because obviously it's pointless turning the AP port into a trunk if the uplink port to the upstream router is not a trunk as well, because clearly you're not going to have the continuity of the flow of that VLAN all the way from the router to the access point, right? And as you can see here, I can create a raft of other things as well to be pushed to the device. So I can create radio servers if I so desired. And if I had more switches, you can obviously push that, or you can group them together, or you can create templates. So I have got a radio server in my lab. So let's this is obviously just for an example, 1812. And give that primary name. And click OK there. Sorry, excuse my phone in the background there. And you can see it's now started to update those things. So if we come back here to interfaces, we can see now it's got a loud VLAN there, and if I come along to the switch, now as you can see here, I've logged directly into the switch. So the recommendation is that you always manage everything from the cloud to keep configurations synchronized, but that doesn't stop you actually logging into the switch. Now, I could quite easily have come to the switch if I come along here and I go to my switches. If I click on there, I can go diagnostics and tools, and I can get a whole raft of information from the switches. I can see the ports, I can see its health, I can see its connecting IP address, okay? And I can get a whole lot of, I can get the configuration, I can manage the licenses and whatnot, I can connect to the CLI. So the switch is connecting to FortiEdge Cloud using a TLS connection. It's going to take a few seconds. There we go. Okay, and if I do a diag switch VLAN list, for example, it'll show me what ports are on which VLANs and so forth. All right. What I could also have done is I could have double clicked on there, and I could have connected, go to GUI or CLI, various actions and capabilities here as well. But in this case, because I knew the IP address of this device, because I'm actually on the same network at the moment, I've gone directly to this device. Now, when you configure your switches on FortiEdge Clouds, the devices, your networks can be anywhere in the world. I could have stood up, site A could have been in New York, site B in London, and site C in Sydney in Australia. Right? It really doesn't matter. That's the nice thing about FortiEdge Cloud. It is a global solution to enable you to have multifaceted control over your network. And as you can see here, if I come to switch and I go to my interfaces, and you can see there it's saying that it's remotely managed, all right, by FortiEdge Cloud. And there you see the same thing again. So port 1 is got a native VLAN of 1, and 10 is on a trunk, and port 24 as well, right? And obviously I can do batch processing as well. I could make changes. So if I come along back to my switch here, and I go interfaces, view ports. Let's say, for example, I wanted to change these all to VLAN 10, to the native VLAN. Click OK. It's processing that, and then you'll see the dispatch message pop up in a second. It just queues that configuration in the background. And once I've done that, once I get that dispatch notification, let me just check that it did actually take that. No, it did, sorry. I'm being impatient there, so it did do it. All right, and again, we just need to wait a few seconds for it to push that configuration to the relevant ports. As I said, it's not going to be instantaneous. There is going to be a slight lag. There you go. It's not that much of a lag. And there's my configuration pushed down to all those ports. So hopefully that's given you a brief. It was only meant to be a brief video, but hopefully it's given you a flavor in terms of the capabilities of FortiEdge Cloud. And as always, thank you very much for taking the time.